Hello, this is Angela with Progress Permaculture. I'm in the middle of planting out my tomatoes and tomatillos, and I wanted to take a couple of minutes here in the evening while the weather is perfect and while the birds are serenading, and just talk a little bit about my annual veggie garden plans for this year. So I am kind of streamlining things a little bit, and I think that that's totally okay. I am, as I have constantly mentioned on this channel, I am dealing a lot with family caregiving responsibilities and involvement in community activism, and I'm thinking about what my obligations are outside of the garden and how that's going to shape how much time I have to give to the garden and shape what I plant this year. So I do a lot of home canning. I do a lot of jamming and making sauces and chutneys. I blanch and freeze a lot of things. I shred and freeze a lot of things, especially summer squash. And I'm thinking not only about what is the time that I can give to weeding and watering and caring for the annual veggie garden, but what is the time that I'm going to have as the summer progresses and as we move into early fall when it comes to harvesting and processing. I would really encourage you, if you are somebody who tends to kind of over plan and underestimate the amount of other activities and commitments that you have, I would really encourage you to sit back for a few moments and kind of take an assessment of what your plans are for the year and what your energy level is, and set realistic goals and expectations for the garden. This year I'm scaling back a lot. I'm not going to grow eggplants. I'm not going to grow things that are fussy and need a lot of work. One of my tree collards died in the winter because I didn't bother to mulch it properly when we had a really bad ice storm. And I'm just going to let that go. And I'm going to focus on other greens, and I'm not going to focus on restarting my tree collards from cuttings because I don't have the time or the energy to do more cuttings of more things right now. So the things that I'm going to be growing in my garden this year are a lot of tomatoes because we eat them. My birds eat them. My ducks eat them. Chickens eat them. Family, we just eat a ridiculous amount of tomatoes. I'm going to grow my tomatillos because those are very easy to preserve. They're easy to roast and then make salsas and chutneys and freeze or can. I'm going to grow cucumbers. I found last year was the best year I had for growing cucumbers. And please check out my next video because I want to talk about a couple of cucumber growing tips and that. I'm going to grow a bunch of cucumbers because we just really ate them and they're easy. And I feel like that's something that I know will get used up. I'm always going to grow my summer squash, and I'm always going to grow my winter squash. In fact, this year I'm going to grow more winter squash. I didn't grow enough last year, and we eat so much of it. I'm really expanding how much winter squash I'm going to grow. I'm going to cut out a number of those things that I would normally do because I just love to grow everything. I'm going to streamline my plan. I'm going to have it be mostly tomatoes, mostly squash, and then a little bit here and there of other things that I know we'll use, but I'm not going to grow massive quantities because I don't have the time and energy to preserve as much. So I'm not growing large quantities of garlic this year. I'm just growing a few pepper plants. I'm growing a little bit of bush beans. I am, trying to lower my expectations so that I have less waste and I have less stress as I go into the latter part of the year where I'm like, oh God, I can't get on top of the harvest. I can't get on top of the weeding. I want to just be good to myself and plan to take care of future Angela, if that makes sense. It's very easy for someone like me to do too much and commit to doing too much. And when we look at permaculture, we want to look at slow, small solutions. We also want to look at, applying self-regulation. And for me this year, that means scaling back my annual veggie garden. I still have loads of things coming out of the garden. I have loads of non-food things, and I have loads of perennial crops of things. I want to make sure that I am balancing my expectations in the annual veggie garden with what will likely be a very abundant year in the perennial parts of the garden. So I'm going to get back to planting. I'll show you a little bit of what I am doing here. I think it's very well and good to have these kind of aspirations that we will be really self-sufficient and we'll be super, homesteady. I've talked about why I don't really like that term, but we're just going to be really self-sufficient and kind of kings and queens of our own little kingdoms. And I think for most of us, at least in America, it's really hard to actually operate that way and still have and value and interact with things like community, right? So for me, I am going to focus a little bit more on community interdependence, and that means I will be less self-sufficient. I've never wanted to be self-sufficient, but it means I will be doing a little bit less for myself and for my own household, at least in terms of what is coming out of the garden here right now. That's okay. It doesn't always have to be fancy. Sometimes it can just be utilitarian, and you can kind of stick to those old standbys that you know do great. Like those tomatoes, like those squash, it's okay to pare down. It's okay to have less diversity. We stress diversity in permaculture a lot because that can bring you resilience, but it can also be overwhelming to manage so many moving pieces, to manage so many different components, that sometimes streamlining and looking for a simpler solution can be better. So even though I want to grow every variety of every annual veggie, I'm gonna just stick to a few simple winners and know that those will get my freezer stocked, and know that they will get my pantry stocked, and know also that whatever I can't produce for myself this year, I can source locally by supporting my local farmers, my local producers. Like last year when I had a failure of some of my berry crops, I was able to turn to local producers because not only do I want to support a robust local economy because it's the right thing to do, but look, when I need it, it's there for me, right? And that's what I hope for this year, that the ways that I can't take care of things for myself, that I can participate in that local resilience. Okay, here's one bed I am prepping. So I'm gonna put a tomato here, and then I'm gonna have a summer squash here, and then a winter squash all along the back. This is just what has volunteered in the bed, and I'm totally okay with most of it. I have some red Russian kale here. I have chard, which functions as a perennial for me. I have nasturtiums here. I have borage, also freely self-sows. This is willow herb, that's a weed. Interestingly enough, I have some American flag poppies, which are something that I planted when we first bought the house in a very different part of the garden, and I have no idea why they are volunteering here. So I'm gonna work around those. I'm gonna try and put my pumpkins in between them. The pumpkins may shade out and kill some of this, but I will try to also harvest as I go, as the pumpkins get bigger. I'm hoping these plants will kind of nurse my pumpkins along when they're little. Then the pumpkins will fill in and take over, and my tomatoes will be here in the back, and it'll all be a nice happy bed. Okay, I've gotten this bed planted out. There are 2 tomatoes in it, 2 summer squash, and 6 pumpkins. So I'll also add too that the things I've put in this year, you notice that in the past I didn't use soaker hoses, and I was pretty proud of it, but the last 2 summers have been unbelievably hot and dry, and I want my garden to be successful. And that means that I have installed soaker hoses down here. We're working on getting a rain barrel system up and going, but all of my squash and my tomatoes I am making sure are on soaker hose lines because they are plants that like a lot of water if they're going to produce well. So thank you for watching today. I'm going to get back to planting and hopefully get all these tomatoes in the ground before it gets dark or before I completely run out of energy, and then I'm going to give them a good watering, and they will get a good night's sleep, I will get a good night's sleep, and we'll start tomorrow off right. Please take care of yourself with your garden projects for this year. Please remember that you don't have to kill yourself for sustainable living. You don't have to overexert yourself. That sustainable living needs to be sustainable. It doesn't mean feeling like you have to manage 1,000 gajillion moving pieces. It doesn't mean that you have to do all of everything. It doesn't mean that you have to maximize every opportunity. Sometimes the opportunity is about rest and is about scaling back and is about thinking about the proportion of energy that you have to give and where you want to put it. I'll be back really soon. There's a lot going on in my permaculture garden here in May. May is such a wonderful season in the garden. Everything is really green and lush and beautiful. And so I have a lot to share with you, but I will try and pace myself, and I'll be back real soon. Bye-bye.